thank you for taking the time to engage with the updates to the logistics endpoint assessment. My name's Andy Pollard, I'm the Senior EPA Delivery Manager, and I'm also joined today with Gabriel Staples, who is the Portfolio Manager for Logistics. What I'll be doing shortly is handing over to Gabriel to start us off with regards to the updates, with regards to endpoint assessment, and then I will be picking up, talking a little bit more around the technical detail and when apprentices are ready for endpoint assessment who have used the COVID-19 flexibility, what the specific process is. So if I just hand over to Gabriel to take us through the next couple of slides.
Thanks, Andy. So yeah, I'll just be talking now really about the changes that are imminent to the endpoint assessments. So these changes affect the three logistics endpoint assessments that we offer. So supply chain operator, warehouse operative, and LGV driver. The changes are, in terms of the meat of the changes, they are to the practical elements only. So effectively what's happened is we've been given a list of standardized list of evidence, which gives us some sort of standardized scope across all awarding bodies who will now be expecting the same sort of evidence. And the reason why we've been given this by NSAR, who are the EQA body, and we've updated this into our specifications and our assessment documentation. The reason why we had to do this was because the wording of the assessment plan had resulted in different awarding bodies requiring different types and standards of evidence. So for the practical criteria, particularly for distinction, I should say, we now have a range of evidence that we've incorporated into our documentation, and we will, when we get onto the slide, you'll see what I mean. In terms of the other change, it's quite a significant change with a criteria about the pass mark, the actual pass mark that was sort of 70%, I think, in the scheme. That's actually been removed. So when we've set a pass criteria for pass or a distinction criteria for distinction, you must meet that fully, and you must meet all of them in order to qualify. So this helps us to ensure that any learner who does pass at pass or distinction level is fully competent or a fully reflective of a distinction learner. So that's an improvement as well, although it will naturally raise the level of demand slightly from those of you who've done it in this year or last year. The other requirement which we had already embedded is that you can only achieve distinction once you've fully satisfied all the pass criteria. So the distinction builds upon the pass criteria, which you would naturally expect, and we have that a requirement already. So this is to start from 1st of January 2021. We had intended and hoped to get this implemented earlier, but we were not able to. However, this does give you, hopefully, as a provider, enough time to prepare for this. Not that there is very much preparation you need to do, but it's just to know and be familiar with the documentation, to know that when you come to assessment, there will be a different criteria in terms of the marking and the mark scheme. And we might look for different sources of evidence around the common standards we've been given. Resits, a note at the bottom there that resits for candidates who haven't passed, they can be under the current regime, but only until the end of the year. Otherwise, it would create a disparity and an unfairness. Next slide, please. So the documents here that are affected are the EPA resource pack is our new version of the guidance we give to centres that we didn't have before, but this is replaces the additional resources document, which is hopefully better for your use. And there's an example from the LGV on the right to summarise the changes, and it will show at the front of the document the particular change we're implementing. So not only is there a change, as I've just described, but there's also a change in format of this document because it didn't exist before. We've also changed the EPA specification along the same lines, and our own internal documents, we've obviously changed our sort of recording forms to make sure that we can only pass a learner if they've met 100% of them, and to incorporate the specific guidance and examples of evidence. And the witness testimony form as well. Next slide, please. So this here is an example of the information that was given to us from NSAR. This is an example for the LGV driver. So the on the left, you've got a distinction attribute statement that is quite vague, so going above and beyond, which you'd expect of a distinction learner. But what does that really mean? Well, actually on the right there's some now concrete examples that every awarding body will be every assessment provider will be working towards. So you can expect your learner would need to demonstrate these kind of areas of evidence. So it's quite helpful. I would hope it's quite helpful for you as a centre in getting learners ready for endpoint after their apprenticeship. So it's nothing that you wouldn't expect really. It's fairly self-explanatory, and hopefully you can see from there, that's the typical things that they would encounter, the types of product evidence they would have, and the types of witness types of behaviours and attributes we would expect to witness for a distinction candidate going above and beyond what's expected. So that is it, and I encourage you to look online for the new versions. And I believe if you are a registered centre with us, you will actually get sent updated versions of this documentation as well. So I will hand over to Andy to talk in more depth about the COVID-19 flexibilities.
Thanks, Gabriel. Okay, so the next few slides are just going to act as reminders. So just as a reminder, during the period of COVID, IFATE and NSAR as the EQA provider and the Trailblazer Group and employer representatives all met to convene for what's known as a task force. The main aim of the task force was to look at the assessment plan in detail and identify assessment components that could not be safely undertaken. So with all three assessment plans, so the supply chain operator, supply chain warehouse operative, and the LGV, they all have an element of practical observation. So following discussions and agreement, we have been provided some guidance documentation from NSAR, which will support apprentices to complete their endpoint assessment by using remote methods. So the remote methods that I'm going to touch on shortly are two, and as you can see on the screen, one is an employer-based observation, and the second one is an employer witness testimony. So there are differences in both approaches. So employer-based observations can be used in lieu of an independent endpoint assessor observation. However, there are caveats around the employer observer must hold an assessor's award and must also have clear demonstrable knowledge of the assessment standard. And what Pearson have also done is put together a fast track independent endpoint assessor training if you do have any employers who fit into this category. The second one is the employer witness testimony. So this is where an employer representative of the apprentice's work location can act as a witness, and they will be able to provide detailed justifications against each of the performance criteria to support the independent endpoint assessor in a discussion at a later date and time which is convenient for the apprentice. It's important to note that these flexibilities are in place until March 2021, and that is at the earliest. IFATE have confirmed that if there are any changes to flexibilities, endpoint assessment organisations will receive at least 12 weeks notice. So if there are any changes, Pearson will inform you as a matter of urgency to make you aware. Just one other point to note is if you have apprentices registered with Pearson as the endpoint assessment organisation, all of these materials and guidance documents can be found within ACE360 in the knowledge base. So the materials, the witness testimony forms, the EQA guidance for all standards, they can all be found in that area. So if we'll just touch on what is the flexibility? So focusing on the witness testimony, so this is where an employer representative does not hold an assessor's award. They will complete a template which is provided by Pearson, which will demonstrate how the apprentice has demonstrated a range of skills and behaviours over a period of time. Now, it's important to use our format, our template, to make sure that the information being transferred to the independent endpoint assessor as part of the professional discussion is true, accurate, and helps inform a valid assessment decision. So we can and do put together a witness testimony training package. So if you have any employer-based witnesses who have never had to complete a witness testimony, we do have to undertake training, and the training will consist of how to write an effective witness testimony, what language we require witnesses to use, and also how statements can be sort of justified. So it's how is the apprentice demonstrating the different performance criteria across each of the different areas. Following on from the employer-based witness testimony, the independent endpoint assessor will hold a professional discussion with the apprentice. So there is a time limit of an hour. However, independent endpoint assessors do have a 10% tolerance. So if, for example, at minute 60, the apprentice is providing a detailed response, the independent endpoint assessor can allow up to an extra 6 minutes. Obviously, we want to make sure apprentices have the best possible opportunity for the higher grades. So that's one of the reasons we do that. And all distinction criteria will be discussed between the independent endpoint assessor and the apprentice. So the reason that all distinction criteria will be discussed will be to confirm sort of validity, authenticity, and reliability. Now, it's important to note that the tested component is not affected in any way by this temporary flexibility. It is only the practical observation session. So the NSAR guidance which we have received includes information around allowing access to local assessors. Now, it's important to remember that local assessors refers to the employer premises and not from the training provider. And the reason for that is the conflict of interest. Similarly, the person from the employer who is providing the observation evidence must be occupationally competent, and Pearson will ask for evidence of CVs, CPDs to demonstrate that. Again, we've mentioned the assessor's award requirement. So this is for the employer-based observation route. So we will be asking for a copy of the employer assessor's A1 certificate or TACWA certificate or D3233. And we will also undertake a conflict of interest activity to make sure that the assessment decisions made don't give any rise for sort of concern and there's no compromise surrounding integrity. I've also included the link there which will take you directly to NSAR's webpage, whereby the full briefing notes and guidance documents can be found. And ultimately, all of our materials which are stored on ACE360 within the knowledge base, they do mirror the guidance provided by NSAR. So with regards to the witness testimony, the witness testimony must demonstrate how the apprentice has demonstrated the knowledge, skills and behaviours across the various criteria. What we are looking for within the witness testimony is justifications, specific examples of when the apprentice has demonstrated key activities. We do also ask for dates of when activities have been undertaken, and the reason for the dates is to make sure that the evidence that has been provided to the independent endpoint assessor is reliable and valid. We do encourage witnesses to either use audio recordings or type their witness testimony. We aren't prescriptive in terms of word counts. However, what we are prescriptive on the quality of evidence being provided as opposed to the quantity. Now, in many situations, apprentices can demonstrate a range of different skills and behaviours, and we would encourage witnesses to look at holistic opportunities for recording this. So we're not asking for one activity per performance criteria. What we will be encouraging, and what we do say within our training to employer witnesses, is think of the situation. How many different skills and behaviours has that apprentice demonstrated, and how can it be mapped in the most efficient and effective manner? Thinking about the instructions, and on the next slide I've actually got a copy of the witness testimony template. We have two columns which indicate either the mandatory, so the pass criteria, and the distinction criteria. If there is no distinction criteria, there is a greyed out box which will indicate the performance criteria relates to a pass mark on its own. Where the evidence has been demonstrated against the different outcomes, a statement is required to support the independent endpoint assessor in making a robust assessment judgment. So remember how I said previously, the witness testimony documentation will be provided to the independent endpoint assessor. The witness needs to have in their mind they are the eyes and ears of the independent endpoint assessor. So clarity of recording, the specifics of recording need to be included. Where apprentices are unable to demonstrate performance evidence, there may be an opportunity to ask a question. And within the templates, we have actually included the specific references to where questions can be asked. Similarly, the responses by the apprentices must be word perfect. So again, the independent endpoint assessor can absorb and fully immerse himself in the apprentice's abilities. Where we've got distinction targeted questions, we have made those quite specific again with regards to during the apprentice's activity and also after the activity. And to achieve a pass, just as a reminder, apprentices must achieve all pass performance criteria, and dependent on the apprentice's work role, the apprentice may achieve either skills outcome 7.2 or 7.3. So this is looking at receiving goods following the workplace procedures or storing goods following organisational requirements. And again, just as a remember, this is for a pass criteria. And then to achieve a distinction, all apprentices must pass all the pass criteria and a minimum of the 10 distinction criteria. So on this slide, you can see this has been taken from the supply chain warehouse operative level 2. We've got skill area 1, which is operate at least one vehicle safely and efficiently. So do bear in mind there are sort of plurals within our materials. So within this section, we will be looking for how the apprentice operated a minimum of 2 vehicles safely and efficiently. Now, those 2 vehicles may cover all of 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, etc., or it could just be 1.1 and 1.2 is focused on vehicle 1 and 1.3 reference to vehicle 2. As long as there is evidence the apprentices operated at least one vehicle safely and efficiently, and there is justified responses against each of the performance criteria, that is absolutely fine. And what you can see in sort of the middle column, so the mandatory pass column, this is where we would be expecting the witness to be providing their rationale. Now, because 1.1 and 1.2 don't have distinction criteria, these boxes are greyed out. Reflecting back to the previous slide where I mentioned that we have a designated question. So for skills area 7, 7.1.3, this is up to the employer witness to frame a question based on an activity the apprentice has been sort of observed. So I have seen you do X. How would you adjust the equipment for a given activity? And what we've also included there is a little bit more narrative. So if the vehicle does not need an adjustment during the activity, the witness must indicate the adjustment required. So again, we're giving additional guidance, additional direction to the employer witness to make sure that the apprentice has the best possible opportunity during their professional discussion. We've also separated out questions to evidence the distinction performance criteria. So towards the back of every template, we will have a distinction style question. So we have on the left-hand side the distinction performance criteria, the question, so the question that has been asked of the apprentice, and again we have written those in for you, the apprentice's response, and whether or not this has met the performance criteria. Moving on to the traffic office, we have included within this standard some additional detail, so some further clarification for the witness, and this is more to do with terminology. So as you can see there, we've defined the term customers, we've reminded witnesses about holistic assessment, we've also included how this learning outcome can be assessed using a simulation, but then we've also broken it down into what the witness must observe. So looking at the first 4 bullet points, identifying customer needs, working with colleagues, dealing with problems, and interaction with customers. We've provided some additional guidance around the different types of situations and also different types of examples apprentices could show when building rapport. So from a witness perspective, we do give additional information and guidance and just pointers of what to be mindful of or what can be included as part of this recording. We've also included simulation scenarios. So dependent on the skill learning outcome, this will direct whether simulation can occur or not. So in this example here, if this skill learning outcome cannot be met through day-to-day activities, there is an opportunity to provide a simulation instead. So the simulation can provide apprentices with the opportunity to either deal with customer problems on the phone, deal with the customer problem face-to-face, or deal with a written communication from a customer with a problem. So here what we're doing is we're giving you the tools in effect to make sure that apprentices have the opportunity to demonstrate these different skills, which can then be used as part of the professional discussion for this component. So a few of the questions that we receive is who can be a witness? So someone who works within first line management of the apprentice or above. So looking at the structure of the organisation, who does that apprentice report into? If it's a team leader, the team leader can act as a witness. If it is a section manager, the section manager can be the witness. What we can't accept is a colleague contributing to a witness testimony. it does have to be somebody within the sort of management chain of command. The employer witness must also have a good understanding of the apprenticeship standard, including the relevant grade criteria and any evidence requirements which are associated. And the witness will also need to confirm that the account is a true reflection of the apprentice's ability. One thing to bear in mind is that we're not expecting the expert witness to grade the evidence. We've only included the pass and the distinction columns just to show the difference in terms of what is required for a pass and what is required for an apprentice. All grading will be done by the independent endpoint assessor. So the 60-minute question and answer session, it will allow the independent endpoint assessor to explore the responses in detail. So the independent endpoint assessor will have sight of the completed witness testimony form at least 5 working days before the agreed assessment date, which will then allow the independent endpoint assessor to read, digest and identify areas which they want to probe a little bit further. This will also encourage the apprentice to provide further detail, again to make sure the observed outcomes are sufficiently met. There'll be a discussion around all distinction criteria, because from a validity perspective, if we are awarding distinction grades, we need to make sure that the apprentice has got those skills, behaviours and abilities. And also it will confirm authenticity and validity. So I spoke briefly around ACE360 and the knowledge base. So once you log into ACE360, so just as a reminder, this is only for training providers. Employers will not have access to ACE360. It will be down to the training provider who has access to the system. They will be the ones uploading the gateway evidence. But as you can see on the left hand side, we've got the different icons. Now the knowledge base is the sort of the magnifying glass over the paper. When we go into standard specific guidance, you need to select the relevant standard, whether it's supply chain warehouse operative or supply chain operator or LGV. You'll see that we have the additional resources or the EPA resource pack, all the sample assessment materials, specification, but then you will also see observation witness and guidance on the level 2 supply chain warehouse operative dispensation. So the guidance document on the dispensation provides further information and further clarity. So very much what we've just run through on these slides. And then in the observation witness, that is the template that the witness must complete. So thinking of next steps now. So you have an apprentice, you've identified an employer witness. The employer witness has undertook Pearson's training. The employer witness has then completed the template form. The next step is for the employer witness to share that information back to the training provider, and the training provider will then need to upload this information into the apprentice's shared area within ACE360. Once that upload has happened, the training provider will then need to notify EPA delivery at pearson.com that the additional information is being uploaded. Now this stage is crucial because ACE360 doesn't have an auto notification function. So if you as the training provider were to upload information into the shared area and didn't notify EPA delivery wouldn't be aware that the information is there. So please just drop an email into EPA delivery with the apprentice's name and the standard, just to advise that the completed witness testimony documentation has been uploaded. We will then inform your independent endpoint assessor. So the independent endpoint assessor who has undertook the planning meeting to state that there is additional evidence there ready for review, and then any additional planning needed will happen between the independent endpoint assessor and the key contact. Assessment will happen on the agreed day, time, and also whether Teams is to be used or Zoom is to be used or Meet, dependent on the employer or the apprentice's technological availabilities. All of that will be discussed, and then results will be made available within 5 working days of assessment. So once the assessment has happened, it will be the exact same process as is now. All the results will be available to view within ACE360, 5 working days of the assessment. So all of our COVID flexibilities or changes or information bulletins, they can all be found on our apprenticeships webpage. So as you can see on the screen, when you get a copy of this recording, the web link above will take you to our apprenticeships page. On the left-hand side, you'll be able to see all the information related to apprenticeship standards. And then on the right-hand side, all of the apprenticeship frameworks, where frameworks are still in. So if you do have any questions, you can contact your named business development manager or your account specialist. If it is for technical or operational questions, so for example, you're unsure whereabouts the apprentice shared area is, you can contact EPA Delivery at epadelivery@pearson.com. You can also go through the customer services phone line, which is 0344 576 0045, or you can use the centre support emails. So if you are a work-based learning provider, you can use the WBL centre support at pearson.com, or if you're a further education centre, you can use FE centre support at pearson.com, or you can use the frequently asked questions document, which is also available in ACE360. Okay, so just pause there for any questions. And I'd just like to thank you for your time this afternoon. And if there is anything in the future, please do reach out using any of the means that we've mentioned on the previous slide. And thank you very much for your time today.